Yes, JINMCDONOUGH.
Great. Before we get into the interview questions, I just have a few preliminary questions for you. Can you tell me what dates you worked at RCA?
Yes, I was hired on April 23rd, 1984. I worked for RCA until GE had purchased the entire corporation, which I believe was sometime in 1989, but I'm not sure on that exact date. And I subsequently worked for all the, as we call, heritage companies that have owned us since then.
Okay. And can you tell us what those have been?
Yes, GE purchased us. Then in, I believe, early '93, they sold us to Martin Marietta, who shortly thereafter merged with Lockheed to become Lockheed Martin, who then in 1997 sold us to a startup corporation, which is now L3 Communications.
Great.
And I'm working for them presently.
Great. Can you tell us what your job title was?
Yeah, I was hired by RCA in '84 as a laborer in the maintenance department.
Okay. And is that your current job title, or have you?
No, my current title is supervisor of maintenance.
Okay. How did you get your job at RCA?
Through my father.
Okay. Did he get you the interview? Did he get you just the job there?
Well, got me the interview and then I was hired.
Okay. Can you describe what you did at RCA?
Yeah, in the maintenance department, we did everything from movement of personnel, equipment, construction projects, anything that would be involved in any of that type of construction or actual maintenance of the buildings.
And what buildings were you responsible for?
Well, those duties changed. The Camden plant, when I was hired, comprised of 2 building, 8 building, 24 building, 12 building, 3 building, and 4 building, which 17 building, which is the big one, which is now the Victor, was the main factory at the time. 4 buildings have been torn down. 10 and 13 building, which I think I forgot to mention, they've been torn down. 2 building, which is now the Board of Education. That was our executive building. I was assigned to that building for about 2 years. But they moved us around. You know, your duties changed.
Okay. What kinds of wages and benefits did you earn at RCA?
When I started at RCA, I think I was started at a little over $7 an hour. The health benefits were very good. Vacation, you had to wait a whole year to get a week. But other than that, I mean, it was not bad work.
What were your relationships with your coworkers like?
It was pretty good. A lot of guys around my age. We were the young guys then, and everybody was family of someone. That's why it was always called the RCA family. The newsletter and the magazine was called the RCA family. Everyone was literally family.
Was your father the only other member of your family employed there, or were there others?
At that time he was, but his brother had worked for RCA, I guess in the 50s. His father, my grandfather, worked there 30-some years and had retired from RCA, so I'm 3rd generation.
Were there a variety of ethnic groups while you worked at RCA?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Pretty much the normal gamut that you'd find in most places. I mean, it was roughly 3,000 people when I went to work there. So just by numbers, you had a pretty diverse group of people.
Have you seen any changes in the demographics since when you first started there and presently?
Generally not. I think the changes that you would see wouldn't be ethnically, but more in, there's more women in management, more, I guess if you want to put it, more non-white people in power. I mean, in the early 80s, it was the end of it was all older white guys ran everything. I mean, and it's just, that's changed, but other than that, the diversity and the types of people is pretty much the same.
Okay. What were your working conditions like?
The working conditions were pretty decent. You have to understand that you were working on buildings that a lot of were in the 100-year-old neighborhood, and by virtue of being an old building, they tend to be a little dirtier and that kind of thing. But you know, the conditions that the company provided were pretty good.
What was one of your most memorable experiences working at RCA?
You know, it's hard to say. We had a lot of fun. We actually had a lot of fun. Coming to work was nice, and some projects that were a lot of fun. And, you know, it's really hard to nail one particular incident down that would stand out. You know, like I said, we did some fun things. But again, I would have a hard time saying anything that really jumps out. I mean, we did some things. I mean, Ron and I worked on a job where two buildings had these big brass lion heads on either side of the door above, and we took them down. They were going somewhere, and I don't know if you guys have them or where they ended up, but they took our pictures for the paper, and that was pretty neat. And a lot of that kind of thing happened because there's just so much history at that location, being basically the starting point for RCA Victor Company. So, you know, but like I said, that comes to mind, and there was a lot of other things like that we did in those days.
Okay. And Ron was Ron McHugh?
From Q, yes.
Okay, great. Can you describe an average work day?
Well, an average work day in those days, it was a straight 7:30 to 4 day with a half an hour lunch. You report to the maintenance building, which in the very beginning was 24 building. It was a small outbuilding which was torn down shortly thereafter, and they moved our headquarters to 12 building, and all the shops and the different supervisors and groups would report, and they would assign you to what jobs you were going to that day. And it could be anything from a construction project going on in 17 building to moving an office set up in 2 building, and you just, you know, could have been anywhere. And we had outbuildings in Mount Laurel, Pennsauken, Deptford, Gibbsboro at the time, and sometimes they'd say, well, you're going to be out there for the next 3 or 4 days, and you know, you load your equipment and head out of town. So you know, you never. It was nice because it was different every day.
What kinds of changes were made over the years you were at RCA?
Well, RCA was definitely a family-oriented type of business. They promoted that. So, you know, everybody was related to somebody, and we were all sons and daughters and brothers and sisters of somebody. You know, being that type of atmosphere, people treated you like family. And it remained that way as RCA. The changes really started when GE bought the corporation, and they, you know, didn't have that same family type feeling. And that's what was unique about RCA, that it was that kind of a structure, which is actually frowned upon by most large businesses nowadays. It may have been then, but you know, I had never worked for a large company before that. I always worked for small companies. So, you know, that was the neat part about working there.
How much did RCA influence the growth of Camden?
Oh, greatly. You know, them and Campbell Soup were the cornerstones. You know, my parents, my grandfather, and they located in Camden to work for RCA and raise their families. And like I said, my father and my uncle had then went to work for RCA. I mean, they were a huge part of the economy and growth of all sorts in Camden. I mean, they were just, you know, they were one of the 2 large players in this town.
How long did you work at RCA?
Well, I worked for RCA for, you know, roughly 4.5 years, and that ended as General Electric purchased them. Mm-hmm. So I really didn't have a lot of tenure years-wise with RCA, but I grew up in an RCA family, so it was always part of the deal. You know, it was always part of what you knew, and they had what they called the family store, where you could purchase their consumer products, and you know, it was always a big deal when at Christmas, you know, every so often Dad would get a new TV, and you know, we had a console reel-to-reel radio. You know, it was like 7 feet long, which was state-of-the-art in the day, and it was a big deal to have it, and you know, so that kind of thing was pretty neat.
felt when RCA closed?
Well, it was a down feeling because most people knew that what we were used to was going to come to an end, and it was not going to continue to be that kind of an atmosphere. And we knew that also being purchased by General Electric, that they had a reputation for buying businesses to take what value they could from them and then either selling or closing them. So looking back in retrospect, we're fortunate to still be here, even though it's actually 5 companies later. So I guess there was some the Camden location, some of it was political based on where we were, the RCA heritage, the depressed area that Camden had become by that time, to try to keep an entity in town. So that, I think that had something to do with the business still being there. You know, and boy, I should know this, 2003, we dedicated a monument on the corner of Federal and Delaware Avenue to the 100-year heritage of RCA, and it went down the lineage of who bought us and when, and that's, you know, that'll stand on the corner for, I don't know how long, but it's, you know, hopefully forever, but, you know, it's a long time.
What did you enjoy about working at RCA?
Enjoyed the camaraderie that, you know, you come in, it was guys, like again, it was guys you became friendly with, you know, guys I worked with, our fathers worked together, and, you know, my father and grandfather particularly were not maintenance guys. Some of the guys I worked with, their fathers were, and when we were younger, they were still there, and, you know, it was kind of like being kids when you used to go out and play. We had to be careful about what we did, because if our dads found out, we would get in trouble. So, you know, it was much like that. You know, it was really an extension of growing up and going to school and hanging out with your buddies, you know.
Before I turn off the recording equipment, is there anything else you'd like to share about your experiences there?
No, I don't think so. I think we pretty much covered it. I mean, it was, you know, I agreed to do the interview because RCA and Camden's been an important part of my life, and you know, RCA for the most part really doesn't exist anymore, and it's a shame, but so anything we can do to document for time what it really was in its day and how important it was to this area and to consumer electronics in the world, you know, recordings and so many things that they developed that we have today that, you know, they developed right here in downtown Camden 100 years ago.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.